So think about the sheer complexity of what actually has to happen at the exact moment of birth. For months, this fetus relies entirely on maternal life support, right? Oxygen, nutrition, waste removal, the works. But then, in a single instant, they have to switch to doing it all independently. Breathing, eating, filtering. If just one of these systems isn't ready to go, the launch fails.
To see exactly how the body pulls this off, we're going to run through our ultimate flight checklist today. We'll look at the brain and sensory awakening, prepping the kidneys and digestion, blood, liver, and immunity, getting those lungs ready, and finally, that dramatic first breath. Okay, system check number 1, the brain and sensory awakening, or wiring the control center.
Near the end of pregnancy, the brain just undergoes this explosive growth to handle the incoming flood of sensory data. To put it in perspective for you, 300,000. That is the staggering number of new neurons produced every single minute during peak neurogenesis in the womb. I mean, by the end of the second trimester alone, we're talking roughly 200 billion neurons. It completely highlights why those final weeks inside are absolutely crucial for cognitive development.
And as this control center wires up, the fetus isn't just chilling in there passively waiting around. No, they're actively exploring their dark, tight little environment. They are constantly testing out their brand new motor and sensory equipment, even practicing these really organized behaviors, bending their arms, making fists, curling their toes. It's actually amazing how much sensory input the fetus is already processing before even seeing the outside world. We tend to think of the womb as this silent, dark deprivation tank, right? But actually, scratch that. It's incredibly rich with sensory data that the maturing brain is just eagerly soaking up. Let's break down some of these milestones. They are actively swallowing amniotic fluid, which, believe it or not, changes flavor based on the mother's diet. So they're actually detecting sweet tastes before birth. Their hearing, it matures remarkably early, between 23 and 25 weeks. So they hear their mother's heartbeat, they recognize her voice, and even react to loud noises outside. And visually, this is crazy. If you shine a bright light right through the maternal abdomen, the fetus will actually react to it, even though their eyelids are tightly sealed shut. Moving on to step 2 on our checklist, prepping the kidneys and digestion, basically initiating the waste management shift. Let's look at how this internal plumbing is built. Early on, the embryo has no kidneys at all. Waste is handled completely by early structures and the mother's placenta. But right around 8 weeks, the embryonic kidneys, the metanephros, begin to form. Fast forward to the 3rd trimester, and these kidneys are functional enough that the fetus is producing its own urine. They actually urinate directly into the amniotic fluid, continuously practicing their own internal filtration. Pretty wild, right? Meanwhile, the digestive system is laying down the track for its very first meal. Important intestinal subdivisions and circular folds are forming. And by constantly swallowing that amniotic fluid we just talked about, the fetus is actively practicing for feeding. It's literally priming the gastrointestinal tract for the nutrient-rich, immune-boosting colostrum that the mother's body is simultaneously getting ready to provide. All right, system check 3, blood, liver, and immunity. It's time for the factory shift change before that cord gets cut. Early in development, this little structure called the yolk sac handles all the early blood cell production. But as the anatomy matures, the growing liver basically clocks in and takes over the manufacturing job. It becomes the primary factory for generating the specialized red blood cells the fetus absolutely needs to survive. And speaking of those blood cells, here's a really fascinating detail. Fetal hemoglobin is structurally different from adult hemoglobin. It's uniquely engineered to grab oxygen way more aggressively. So when the maternal and fetal blood vessels run past each other in the placenta, the fetal blood acts like a giant, powerful magnet. It maximizes the amount of oxygen it can pull from the mother to fuel all that rapid growth. But blood isn't just for moving oxygen around. It's also a delivery system for defense. Now, because the baby's immune system is totally naive, it's been living in a protected, sterile bubble this whole time, the mother transfers an essential starter pack of antibodies right across the placenta. This acts as a crucial temporary shield against all the harmful microbes the baby's going to face the second it leaves the womb, giving the newborn's own immune system a chance to safely boot up. Number 4 on the checklist, preparing the lungs. This is the final frontier. Understanding this timeline is so vital. Around 24 weeks, the baby's nostrils open and the tiny air sacs in the lungs, the alveoli, begin to form. Born before this, survival is really, really tough. But look at 28 weeks.
the premature survival rate leaps up to around 80%. And that massive jump is directly tied to the lungs finally producing a highly specialized, literally life-saving substance. The magic ingredient here is surfactant. Think of the tiny air sacs in the lungs kind of like wet plastic bags. Without something in there to keep them slippery, the wet sides just stick together and you can't inflate them. Surfactant is essentially a biological detergent that coats the inside of the lungs. It breaks that surface tension, preventing respiratory distress syndrome, and making sure that when the baby finally breathes real air, those lungs easily pop open and, more importantly, stay open. And finally, step 5, the dramatic first breath. The countdown is at 0, and it's time to reroute the entire system. The very instant the baby is cut off from the placenta, oxygen levels drop, and carbon dioxide rapidly builds up in their blood. This rising CO2 sets off a massive alarm in the medulla oblongata, the brain's respiratory center. The brain essentially screams, "Breathe," and that triggers a massive, unusually deep first inspiration. This is usually accompanied by that classic newborn cry, which physically forces all the remaining amniotic fluid right out of the airways. And with that single, powerful breath, some absolute cardiovascular acrobatics happen. Inside the womb, blood physically bypassed the lungs using special shunts, because, well, the lungs weren't breathing air yet. But the second those lungs inflate, pressure in the chest changes completely. A little flap in the heart called the foramen ovale literally slams shut. Another bypass vessel, the ductus arteriosus, physically collapses. And just like that, instantly, all the deoxygenated blood is permanently rerouted straight to those newly functional lungs. This perfectly summarizes the immense hidden engineering we've just covered. It's like a flawlessly coordinated transit system, literally switching train tracks while moving at full speed, going from a fluid-breathing, cord-dependent organism to an air-breathing, independent human in mere seconds. It's just an absolute architectural marvel. Seeing this rigorous biological boot camp, how the brain wires itself up, how the lungs brew their own specialized detergents, how the heart physically remodels itself on the fly, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other incredible, fully automated processes is your body quietly managing right now, without you even having to think about it? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep wondering.